right, hello everyone. Welcome to TRI, Brian Beamish's tutorial series working with Coinigy platform on Fibonacci retracements, extensions, and chaos theory. This first video in this three-part series is going to be on retracements. Then we'll move on to extensions and then finish up with a look at chaos theory. So without further ado, let's get to work. We're going to click on this Launch Advanced Mode button, which pulls up our nice price charts. You notice that we have a bit stamp, Bitcoin, on the chart and the daily chart loaded. For the purposes of the tutorial, we will put the side panels away so we can see the prices up close. We are going to take our mouse and we're going to mouse over onto the left-hand side. And we're going to pick the third choice down the left-hand side. We're going to pick this Fibonacci Retracement tool. So we're going to click on that. And what you really want to do here is you want to ask yourself at any given point in time, this is what I always tell new students to truly understand what it is you're doing. You should write on your chart, what question is this study trying to answer? And if you write this on your chart the first, let's say, couple dozen times you actually do this, then it will help you just determine whether you're actually drawing the studies correctly. Because quite often when I'm working with new students, they end up actually doing the studies backwards. So if we have, what question is this study trying to answer? And keep in mind, retracement, basically the answer that we're looking for is how much of this most recent move did the market, or is the market likely to retrace or take back? So if we measure, say, maybe we'll go back in time a little bit here. Well, this is probably a good range right here. If we take our study and draw it off of the low and drag it all the way back up to the high, then what we're really asking with this particular study is how much of this move is the market likely to take back on any kind of technical bounce, or what technicians call a retracement. You notice that the levels that I have on my retracement study, these are, every technician is obviously unique, but it's sort of commonly accepted levels to trade with. These are the levels that I like to use and I find the most relevant. And if we go through a few examples, I think you'll understand why. The top of this particular range, 100%. The bottom is 0. And you notice 0.382, that's 38.2% of the range. 61.8, 78.6, and 88.6. These are sort of my favorite Fibonacci retracement levels. You'll also notice that I have 0.50 on here. Technically not a Fibonacci retracement level. You'll never find a fib level that's that round and even. This level is actually attributed to a gentleman by the name of W.D. Gann. And his basic thesis is that markets like to retrace 50% of their most recent move. So whenever I'm doing one of these retracement studies, I usually include the 50% level in the study. So, as we did there a moment ago, we had a nice down movement in the price of Bitcoin, and we're just wondering, what is this actual bounce? And does it bounce into sort of a level that we would expect? For simplicity purposes, there's two particular zones that I like to concentrate on when it comes to retracements. The first is, interestingly enough, 38.2 to Mr. Gann's 50% level. I say interestingly enough because in my education programs, I actually teach this 38.2. I like students to consider it the first stop target. And sometimes it's the only stop on the retracement. Market will bounce and then resume its down move. So I like to call that the first stop. Remember, we had Mr. Gann, and actually we like to affectionately call the 50% the level the 50% rule. I like to use this as sort of my first zone, that if I was going to be interested in, say, joining this downtrend, I'd want to see how price acts in this area. The second area of interest for me is from the 78.6 to the 61.8 fib zone. And in this particular case, I like to call this the reload zone. So if I was a institutional player and I had shorted the top of the market, this is where I would reload short ideas. And M tops, as we'll see going forward, they often stall out in this zone, and it makes it an excellent trade location. So, in fact, we have a previous student of TRI's who's gone on to do great things in the crypto space. He likes to call this the dump chaser zone. So these would be the two areas of most specific interest on a Fibonacci retracement study that I would want to consider for trade location. So in this particular case, we drew the top of the study off of the very highest high, and we drew the bottom of the study off of this reaction low. And you notice that if we draw our dump chaser zone, you see that in this particular case, the market rallied to the first stop target, but that's the only stop on this particular dead cat bounce rally. So it works very, very well, that 38.2, as sort of a keep you honest indicator. In fact, what we often tell people through the education program is you can't even really tell whether this is transitioning into a bull or whether it is still a bear until this zone has actually been resolved. And you can see how back and forth, finally got up into there, and then, right on the tag, in comes an M in price, and back down we go. If we zoom out a little bit and look at other situations, you'll see that in this particular case, if we draw our study from this high down to this low, you see that we didn't actually stall out, but we actually worked our way higher and actually were able to head to new highs. This is an interesting level up top here. Refer to the extension module coupled to this to talk a little bit about the significance of this level up here. But also, too, chaos theory also painted an interesting level up top there as well. What I might suggest with this particular study is if we actually go the other direction, and let's say we had this really big rally, and we were thinking maybe we want to join this rally. Notice 38.2 to 50% level, we can draw that on our study. And in this particular case, we'd actually call this the pump chaser zone, which I like. That works well for me. You don't really want to chase up markets. If this is still a bull, and in this particular case it was, well, we want to let the market come back to the 38.2, maybe even as far as the 50% level, and then let's see how the price acts down here. And as you can see, remember in this particular case, when we bounced to 38.2, we put in an M and we kept going. In this particular case, we bounced down into 38.2 to 50%, and then we put in a big W, and back up we went. So in this particular case, you can see how 38.2 to 50% worked excellently as a sort of, we're going to turn this market from a bear back into a bull. If we look back over time, you see that this principle works over and over and over. And this works as an excellent trade location tool. So let's go back a few years and let's see if the principles hold water. In this particular case, this is the 2017-2018 peak and trough. We're going to remember our number one question we want to ask ourselves. What is this study actually trying to answer? Well, what we're really doing when we draw low in price, and let's maybe just go off of this key low. We can always zoom in and make sure that this number is accurate. So we'll take our tool, draw it right off of that low. You can even put the magnet button on so that it's nice and crisp. Then we're going to zoom back out. In fact, you know what? I might even, let's go off of that big low there. That one looks pretty important. All right. So we've measured the low end of the range to the high end of the range. And we said, you know, just to make sure, am I drawing this study correctly? Let's go and grab our question. Not a bad idea for you to actually just write it on your screen. Where's our question? There it is. What question is this study trying to answer? And it's trying to answer how much of this move is the market likely to take back. So is that 88.6% of this whole move? No, it isn't. Is that 78.6? No, it isn't. This is backwards. So that's why it's a good idea to write that question right on your screen the first dozen times you do this, just to make sure you're doing it correct. So we'll go in and we'll reverse the study. And now we see, notice, 38.2 to 50%, the first stop target. In this particular case, we came down into that level, you can see right there, and we didn't go any further. We bounced into that level and then right back up. Notice that you can also do this going the other direction as well. So we can draw a study off of this first stop target low, which happens to be down in there, and draw it back going the other way. Of course, we know that that's backwards after our what is this study trying to answer. So we see that indeed, in this particular case, we bounced off of 38.2, that first stop target, and right back up into, oh, interesting, a reload short zone. Remember I had said earlier that this works very well as a place to sort of identify where institutional players, remember institutions sell up markets, the public sadly buys up markets. So you can see where the institutions stop the bull. You might even argue that, and I teach in our education programs, that the bar that made the high plus the preceding bar, this is where the institution stepped up and stopped all the buying pressure and actually reversed it and headed it back down. So we like to call this the institutional fingerprint. Why don't we make that clear so that you can actually see it? And notice this zone right here lines up very nicely with that reload short zone, 61.8 to 78.6. And you notice that at the very sort of bottom of this entire topping pattern range, look how they brought the market right back up into that reload short zone and rolled it back over. So excellent trade location. Really good example of how you can use Fibonacci retracements to gauge where we are heading back down, first stop target, and then also is this not a bad shorting location if we have that dead cat bounce, counter trend rally, and I want to sell against this high, reload short zone. Also notice too that the principle works going the other direction as well. So here is the reload long zone. And you see that as price dipped into this zone, buyers actually stepped back in and did some buying and pushed the price back up. And actually that zone lasted for quite some time, didn't it? Suppose we could also, refer to the follow-up modules on this tutorial series on extensions to try and understand levels heading to the downside, and also chaos theory to identify levels to the downside. What I'll just finish off with is keep in mind, unfortunately, to a certain degree, yes, to a certain degree, no. But cryptocurrencies, to all intents and purposes, are still venture capital. So what I often suggest to people is have the 88.6 on your charts as well, as this 61.8 to 78.6 works excellently for a quote-unquote reload zone. These are institutional levels that are definitely paid attention to. And quite often over time, what you'll see, and do this study yourself just to validate it, is you'll actually see that the market ultimately ends up putting in the bottom right off that 78.6 level. It happens all the time. But if the more venture cap you go, what I've personally found in my experience is the more relevant the 78.6 to 88.6 fib levels are for sort of like, we'll call this the VC reload zone. So this is another reason why I have 78.6 to 88.6 on my charts, is what I've often found in crypto because of the venture cap nature. I trade a lot of penny stocks, same thing. Your reload zone for venture capital often lines up with 78.6 to 88.6. And you can see this was a very, very good example of how the market came down into that venture cap reload zone, put in a bottom, and then just took off the other direction. Now, as a closing thought, what do you think the odds are that this failure, this rally, actually was in one of these reload zones? And what you'll find over time, the more and more you look at this, the more and more you study this, you're going to find the more and more these levels line up. So it really shouldn't surprise anybody when they do these studies that you see that actually the market topped right at 61.8, or what we affectionately like to call on this site as the mountain man level. All right, hope you've enjoyed that quick tutorial on how to use Fibonacci retracements, how to set up the levels, and some levels for you to consider going forward. The only thing left for Brian to say at this point is bye for now.